True. Let's go to Karma Green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like pirates' lines, we break the bondage tight. Kamji speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. Chill drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kamji verse.
I want to use this time to, just piggyback on a conversation that the good brother Neferkari Dessalines started with respect to Oshay Duke Jackson and his constant, animus against Pan-Africanist and Pan-African nationalist sentiment. Whole time he's living in Uganda, running the Kinganda channel, and he refuses to call out the tribalism of Yoweri Museveni because he knows if he did that, he would get kicked out of the country. Probably would have to go back to Poland, right? So if we understand just the history of, individuals like, Museveni and Paul Biya, we can see similar tribalist patterns. In Cameroon, what you have is a conflict between the so-called Bantu populations and the Bantoid, so-called Bantoid populations, mainly the Bamilekes. Now, the Bantoids are people from the so-called Sudanic zone of Africa who migrated south and adopted Bantu lexical items. So not necessarily so-called Bantu, but people who adopted Bantu words because of contact. In Uganda, the conflict is more in between the so-called Nilotic populations and the so-called Bantus, right? So with respect to Uganda, not many people know about how Museveni's government entrenched regional and ethnic inequality in Uganda. His rule centralized political and economic power in the western and central regions, especially among elites tied to his own Bahima background. So some of the northern and eastern regions like Teso, Acholi, and Karamoja, these are the so-called Nilotic or Sudanic using Greenbergian phyla. These populations were politically marginalized and economically neglected. So early Uganda was dominated by northern and eastern groups in the army and the civil service, right? And this is particularly in the pre-1960s era. But under Museveni, the power base shifted to southwesterners, particularly the Bahima and the Nkole, or Banyankole. The Uteso from Teso in East Uganda, who once held influence, saw a decline, especially after the loss of cattle in the 1980s. Museveni retained tight control through the army UPDF, ensuring a loyalty by staffing it with allies from his own region, right? So this is another example of ethno-nationalism practiced by Museveni, right? And mainly pulling people from the so-called Bantu, west and central regions, particularly the southwestern Bahima, against those from the east and the north. So Easterners and Northerners in Uganda were largely excluded from state patronage networks, development funds, jobs, and corruption benefits all flowed to the Western elites. The disarmament campaigns in Karamoja and war in Acholi land deepened poverty and distrust. So the 2005 constitutional amendment removed the two-term limit, allowing Museveni to run again in 2006. This was achieved through a referendum tactic, linking a return to multi-party politics with lifting the term limit, effectively a sleight of hand. So he basically changed the rules, he allowed multi-party politics, but then he switched it and allowed himself to run again, after 2 terms, basically solidifying his power. And at this point, he's been in power for decades, right? So there's been a weak civil society and rural disempowerment used by Museveni for ethno-nationalist means, right? So ordinary Ugandans, even educated professionals, have little influence on national politics. The civil society remains weak, and much of Uganda's stability rests on international donor support and military control, not domestic dissent, right? Museveni can be compared to long-serving African rulers like Paul Biya. His self-image as a liberator is masking a deeper reality, right? And his authoritarian regime is sustained by regional favoritism and military loyalty, right? So again, this is just an example of the ways that different leaders like Museveni can maintain power. And a lot of what he's doing is very, very similar with what Paul Biya is doing in Cameroon in preventing the Bamileke and Grassfields people outside of a few hand-picked puppets from ever gaining political power and authority in the region, it is a classic tactic, and it's interesting how Oshay Jackson will not criticize Yoweri Museveni. He won't even talk about the Pan-African International Conference. Shout out to Kevin in my Patreon. And if you would like to join the Patreon to send me some links and tips, the links for that are in the description. But he exposed the Pan-African International Conference, where you had Africans from all over the world on the continent and the diaspora uniting in order to build a united front for economic development and progress. And drifters like Oshay Jackson, he wants to ride the fecal brain assimilationist algorithm. The fecal brain assimilationist algorithm is giving him his daily bread. He doesn't want to talk about the Pan-African level of engagement in Uganda and how Uganda is used as a beacon to unite the African continent. He doesn't want to mention this, and he definitely is not going to talk about the Southwestern elites, the Bahima elites who run Uganda today. Because if he were to criticize Yoweri Museveni's tactics, he would be completely kicked out of the country, right? So this is just a clear case of hypocrisy, a clear case, of talking out of both sides of his mouth, claiming that he's going to be willing to go after Museveni, but he's clearly not. So this has just been a breakdown of the different tribalist politics of Museveni, very, very similar to Biya, and numerous similarities and parallels with other authoritarian rulers, Owatsura in Ivory Coast, Samia in Tanzania, and on and on and onward. This is a pattern that we see, and obviously grifters like Oshay are not going to call it out unless you could grift to the fecal brain assimilationists and continuously promote division on the African continent and on these interwebs. So that's all I got for y'all on this. I hope to catch you on the next one. Peace.
Let's go to Karma Green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like pirates' lines, we break the bondage tight. Kamji speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. Shift drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kamji verse.